Lobo was a turning point for me.
Here we go.
Yeah, well, you can start page 1. Alan Grant wrote this script for me. I won't go into details of this, some funny stories attached to it, but it's completely irrelevant to the storytelling aspect. And this was the first, I think at this point I might have done a couple of the big books, which were these paradox books, and they were like a rigid 9-panel grid, and they were often like documentary style comics. But
they didn't really have much continuity, did they?
No, they had very little continuity. But this Lobo story, this was kind of my first, this was really my first kind of DC job, and I was going to go all out to make this the best thing I'd done, which I do with every new project I start, every new page I start is going to be the best thing I've done. It's always, it never is, and it's always a disappointment, but just flick on with this, the first couple of pages, thanks. Okay, but again, what I was doing, there's an establishing shot of sorts, you know, but you know, you go into the second panel, and then the third panel, and then the fourth panel, there's not an awful lot of thought as, you know, like where the imaginary camera is going. More of the thought was to who's speaking first, right? I'll need to swing the camera around so they're over at the left. There still wasn't a great deal of like fluidity, you know, in the kind of the visual narrative. There wasn't really a lot of that kind of thing going on. I was just trying to make the drawings good and trying to make it fit together as a page in terms of you can see what's going on and all the speak bubbles are going to go in the right places, so it will read that way. If you flick on to the next page, thanks. This was a 3-page sequence where Lobo's already down in the ground, and he looks up, and the opening scene, the opening frame is we're looking up at this big guy with the Captain Caveman club, and then the next 3 panels he starts knocking him about, you know. And I'd worked this. It's a 3-page scene. It just slowly flick through it. Thanks. Oh no, that's yeah, that one. And then here's the, you know, it's just, although I'm still breaking the 180 rule and stuff, it's one of these things where it was a fixed camera. It was like the camera was in a tripod and you were watching something choreographed, and I really thought it out. And it's, you know, like if he's doing a right hook, he's leading with the left leg, and then he's stepping in with the right leg as he goes for a left uppercut. No, I mean, it was really choreographed. But I sent it in. The whole thing was done in blue line, which is why I scanned them in and tried to kind of darken them up a bit, so they're kind of crappy looking. But I sent this in. Dan Raspler was the editor, and I was sure he was going to get back to me and say this is great. And it took him like 10 days or something to get back to me. And when he eventually got back to me, he said, "Dude, I've been wanting to phone you. I just didn't know how to go about it." And I thought, that doesn't sound good. And he said, "You know, that I can see what you've done, you know, and I can see how much thought you've put into this, but," he said, "it's just, I can't believe the fact that it's all from a fixed angle, and it's just boring. You've put so much work into this, and it's just boring to look at." And he said, "If you never actually thought of like going for a close-up, you know, you've already seen the right hook, so maybe with the left uppercut, you don't need to see the 2 full figures again. Why not just go in and see the hand connecting with the jaw? You know, you can do that, and you pull out and move the camera about a bit. You know, you don't need to see how it fits together. It's just a fight." So if you, I redrew quite a lot of the pages in it. So
that's the second version.
So there's instead of if you flick between them, yeah, you know, so then it becomes a full image style. It becomes a full panel shot with 3 panels overlaid. I mean, the panels are still not being tilted around or anything. It is still quite stayed, but it's basically the same thing done from different angles and kind of zooming in and out. It was really my first stab at it, and you know, I'm not comfortable with us taking this long over it because it still doesn't really work that well. But
but it's a good illustration of the difference.
Yeah, just a different approach to it. Yeah, because really before then I was still kind of working. Although I'd seen Mobius stuff and Otomo stuff and a whole lot of other Frank Miller and Dave Gibbons and a whole lot of other good stuff. I mean, the fact I'd managed to look at so much of Dave Gibbons' work and not actually realise that was pretty much perfect like simple economic storytelling, you know. I had never really picked up that much of what he was doing, you know. So this was a real big stepping stone for me. Fortunately, it never got published for other reasons which aren't really relevant to the whole storytelling issue. It was more a censorship thing. The story was a bit crude, but it never got published. But after this was back, I think, kind of early to mid-90s, and this was the start of my slowly growing obsession with storytelling, which eventually, or not long after, came to completely overshadow what was my previous main preoccupation, was trying to make the drawings look good. Unfortunately, the price I've paid is that all the time I used to spend trying to make the drawings look good, I now spend in storytelling, so there is a bit of a... Storytelling is more important to me than the drawings actually looking pretty, so... and I have, over the years, at times I've become terribly, terribly bogged down with storytelling, and most of the time I still get a script, and I read it and reread it and reread it until I really see it in my head, and I start doing thumbnails in the margins of the script, wee tiny thumbnails that really only I can understand. And I do lots of thumbnails for each panel, then go back, almost always go back to the first one I did for each panel. But I still, you know, I can't help just making sure there isn't a better way of doing it. And I do waste an awful lot of time doing this kind of thing, but as I say, I suppose it's just insecurity that, you know, that I don't just trust my instincts enough.
So did you find that on subsequent projects, like, because we've got an X-Men page here?
Yeah, go on.
Were you doing the same sort of things? Because you were working with Grant on this, weren't you?
Yeah.
But this is, I remember most of this being much more like straightforward, and it seemed like with the We 3 stuff, you took it. You went a bit more strange.
Well, yeah, well, we 3 came after it, but yeah. with this, I had tried a bit of jiggling panels around and, you know, making things look kind of jazzy on the page, but basically what worked best for me, and maybe it's getting back to the Akira and the Incal, you know, other Moby stuff like that, although he did actually do quite a lot of American
especially later on,
but that kind of the Otomo stuff and like a lot of the European stuff I was looking at, it was basically, they were fairly straightforward page layouts. Everything that was happening was really happening inside the frames. It's like when you go to the cinema, the picture doesn't actually move about all over the place. It's actually the actual window you're looking at is still there in the same position. So,
but I think that's like that thing that I remember when Watchmen came out. Everybody was saying, "Oh, Dave said in an interview somewhere that you just forget that panel frame. If they're all the same, you really start looking at the picture, don't you? Yeah. And then when you get a big one, it's like, whoa! But it might not be a double page spread. It might only be like 6 out of your 9 panel grid. Yeah. It looks massive compared to all these little 1/9 of a page things. And it's a sort of a different way of doing it than like that image thing that maybe have a double page spread and full bleed and it's all coming out at you. Yeah. But you can have that impact in a much more subtle way, can't you?
Absolutely, yeah.